Shelley here with Jupiter Point of Talis. This is Jupiter Hour. Um, this ain't Saturn Day, is it? It's Sunday. It's about to be Sunday anyway, so that would be Mercury night. And Ascendant's 29 degrees Libra. Mars with Lilith Mercury, 26 Scorpio. Midheaven ruled by the Sun in the second house here in Scorpio, leaving a square to Pluto. I know this is almost an asking for a chart for Jupiter talisman, but the ascendant is going to be ruled by Mars soon. I already did that. I already did that. Mistake or not, I will find out. Um, the moon is approaching the galactic center and squaring Saturn. So I'm not going to pull up the Jupi Procyon because moon is squaring Saturn and Neptune. Yeah, the last time we had actually the person that inspired me to do astrological body butters. I just, I'm lazy. I take a shea butter and I put a couple of oils and I consecrate it. It's for personal use. It's amazing. It's great. But when she used it in election with the moon square in Saturn, it was the single white woman scandal. And it was so sad because she waited so long to say what she wanted to say. And that was Caitlin. Um, so I learned from Caitlin because I was doing the same election there with Antares, and I'm not going to use a talisman, do a talisman when the moon is squaring Saturn Neptune, although it's trining Chiron. Um, so I was watching Kyra Reiberg's 12th house and several Deacon videos, and it's called Threads of Fate, and that's her astrology podcast. First of all, the first thing that came out to me um, is how my having Rahu in the first decan of Gemini, which means in the Jupiter term, so or bound, how to call it, which means I combine theory with knowledge from experience. And I definitely remember Saturn going into my 12th house and activating Saturn in my 9th house. And I'm like, I don't have a teaching. And that was, but that in many ways, that was the point, but that was not, I don't wish my enemies to learn in that way, although my enemies were my enemies because they learned it that way. So, um, so learning from experience and applying astrology with the historical context and everything, and understanding that Hellenistic astrology was created at a time where men discovered they can also, um, that sperm is important to breed, and they practiced that newfound power by raping as well, although they probably raped before that. Um, but then Diana became goddess of the hunt rather than just goddess of fertility. She became Artemis, and Artemis had to protect women from rape. And this kind of men were oscillating between worshiping a woman like a goddess because she brings babies to raping women and taking their wombs, even surgically, um, to use later in cloning. So that is, yeah, and then my other colleagues won't talk about it because they don't have that, they don't come from that spectrum of the scope. um, and from that standpoint, I can definitely see how many things that we're taught as astrology or astrology of different times in history um, are only relevant within the scope of that historical context and that cultural context. Now, of course, probably the astrology predicts, okay, those as well. So there is kind of like in art and film, where the art creates the film, the life creates the art. And I think Lauryn Hill talked about it when she did an album after album, and she said she didn't get to live, so her albums became not, you know, the miseducation of Lauryn Hill again. And and she said she took a break, she took a full stop to live her life. Um, and I liked it because that's also what Kara Ryberg did in between. Um, and then the art became meaningful because it was inspired by life. And then the art is also inspiring life. So it's the same with any art, whether it's mathematicoi or filmmaker or politician. Um, and from that standpoint, um, I want to address what in astrology we call the 12th house, but I also have addressed the tiny war teaching and how even the shamanic wisdom about this house is important in the times that we are in. Because right now, when Neptune is in Aries, where everything is faraway land, isolation, is it real or is it not? Okay, even with the AI, even with my channeling experiment, where it's like, what am I channeling? But also, am I even channeling a person or a spirit or a computer interface of? And 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 it's both adapting our knowledge and creating the knowledge or the corpus of knowledge that is relevant for the spirit of the times, and being surprised in how ancient traditions can predict certain things today and how we still need to adjust. And the 12th house is a great example for that because I remember a teaching of Lada Duncheva and Nicholas Stoyanovich about the 12th house. Um, First of all, somebody had a Mercury in Pisces, and Nicholas Stoyanovich said when they were closing themselves in a room, they were able to think or to express themselves, Mercury, um, better because that place was bringing that Mercury. Okay, and Pisces has a Neptunian quality to it. Okay, um, Pisces is not exactly Neptune, and it's not exactly the 12th house, but it has a thread that does align. And it's important because we need to learn, we need to be able to discern, and we also need to be able to connect. Um, and at different times, we're going to learn the different teachings. Okay, when everybody was doing 12th house equal Pisces equals Neptune equals Jupiter, hopefully, because that's the ancient ruler, equals Pisces, then we needed to learn Hellenistic astrology, where the 12th house is the 12th house, Pisces is Pisces, because Pisces doesn't show up only in the 12th house. Um, and yet, at this very Piscean time, okay, um, we we need to remember another teaching, and it is that the 12th house is the bedroom. And there are many significations. It's the dream state, it's the place where we have hidden enemies. So, invasion, even from open enemies, they need to ally up with a hidden enemy from within, preferably. And that would be what brings people to hospitals, what brings people to jail, what brings people to be homeless, how are they treated. This is why Finland, that is a very small country, applied housing first and open dialogue that came from Netherlands, housing first came from US, to treat both homelessness but also schizophrenia, psychosis, the things that they used to castrate people on, and they still do. Um, but when it comes to intelligence advantage, if they have a KGB person, they can't just invade Russia and put it to a risk and intimidate China on the way and have United States looking and saying, what's that? Um, that's a small, like it's a big territory, but relatively it's a small country. But if a KGB comes to Finland and they have a housing first, independently of ability to work. And they can speak and share their testimony about the craziest of things that happen to them, and people will believe them and adjust the society to fit to their having living a good life. First of all, KGBs are going to flock to Finland. Secondly, Finland is going to have a strategic advantage on Russia. And so And let me tell you, I did a thesis on the philosophy of medicine. I spoke to some crazy people, including myself. The most accurate predictions about the agendas behind wars came from people that met me and say, "You look 200 years old." And I'm like, "Thank you, dear." I'm like, "No, you are a young soul." And says, this person is poisoning my food. They're poisoning my food. And none of us sees anything because they're looking at the frequencies, even the nurses at the hospital. So this person is very sensitive to frequency. Okay? And the feminists are blaming me for things that I didn't do. And I'm like, what? Wait, what feminist? What are you talking about? Um, and I was there after the Me Too. Okay, I was basically what would people consider a political prisoner. Um, it was not a jail, but they basically, okay, people say, hey, your story sounds more interesting. I tell my story, but this person told me why it's happening, and he talks about the androgynous agenda. And I tried to ask him, wait, the pills that they give you, do they help you to ground yourself? This is a little bit, but then I go up to dimension 20 again. And as we begin to speak, I understand that he was kidnapped to hospital and somebody did medical experiments on them. And the doctor also raped them. And and none of the things that he's given is actually useful. Is being kept there pretty much to keep him out of actually talking to people. And another thing he told me, which was why I was targeted, he said every time I speak to people, a year later, a couple of years later, whatnot, they begin to either get married or have children. I said, I do nothing. It's not that and that would be a person that is kind of like a walking talisman. Either his parents were trying to have a child. My parents, for example, were trying to have a child a lot before I was born. And each and every time people would be around me, they would be suddenly, even people that couldn't fall pregnant, I was like a birthing talisman. And he was targeted because they were trying to do, and now I can understand that because they were trying to do control of the population and control birthing. And they were trying to seclude the people who were like birthing talismans because the fertile people, they wanted to attack the lives so that people will constantly be in trauma and mind control when it comes to what population they're willing to grow. This is also why there is femicide. It's not that they are misogynists, it's that they want to be in control of the creation of life. In fact, they do mislead men a lot, and the red pill was one of those things. And we see how that all connects to the bedroom. Okay, we see how that all connects to the bedroom, because the way society is around this topic is both affected by, but is also affecting. And we are living at a time where, how should I say that? I talked about the Genghis Khan and the way Genghis Khan basically conquered so many parts of the world, um, the Mongol Empire. It was by being informed right from a child that his brother could rape his mom because his brother from another mother was legally allowed to rape his mom. And he had to murder his brother to protect his mom. Maybe it's a Cain and Abel story. I don't know. But like we don't know the entire story of creation, it was quite a while ago. So, and this story will keep being, and thinking about the fact that our stories of creation, I remember I don't remember if it was Vietnam or for what country that they had this lady that has an egg, and she brings that egg and they celebrate the creation of the dragon coming out of the egg, and she had she created the world with the sea monster, and the sea monster of course was at sea, but they divorced actually, and they decided to part the, I'm sorry I'm telling it so wrong because because but this shows you how stories of creation get transmuted and lost in translation. And the fact is that they had a child together, but they had I think two eggs or two children, and they separated and they shared custody. So one got the child and lived in the sea, and she got the child and lived in the land, and that would be we the people. So they're the children of the sea and the children of the land. Um, and I think about how the sea animals are so connected. Um, I don't know with the story of creation, but with like other cultures, like the Inuit that lived by the sea, and they literally had to appease a trafficked child that drowned into the sea to get food because she was so connected with nature and the sea animals, and how a trafficked child would affect the entire oceanic. And of course, because if we go back to, and I was watching this walking rant video by Mr. Fung, um, and he begins to talk about how the West thinks it's the opium wars again, and we understand that the opium or the growth of opium, or the opium trade, it was used to rape people. Okay, it was used, and then the money laundered from the trafficking would be later used in wealth consolidation around oil and gas, and how trafficking is so connected to drugs. But the Inuit story shows us that that trafficked child affect the mammals, and if we sail the sea in opium wars, of course we fish in areas where weren't able to fish before, and fishing was very dangerous because it's tending to the sea. But also, there's a booming industry of trafficked people, and that of course affects the absorption of food. Okay, sexual boundary violation affects the absorption of food, and who would go to a working lady if not a person that is in such soul isolation and defragmentation that they need the bits and pieces of that so-called comfort, or are swayed by people taken to, hey, let's go travel there and there, and they have drugs, gambling, and supposedly sex. It's rape. Then they wonder why the only women that would be with them would be from financial interest, and then because it's not something that is orgasmic, it's not something that is tantric, and and women feel what? The touch and the consciousness of the person that is not honoring of their what? Fertility. For example, so we yeah, this is something that is actually very related to the Sedna story, and Uranus is now conjoining Sedna. Um, but we kind of see how, okay, for example, the ladies at the red light district are the hidden enemy um, of Netherlands because they're being seen as, okay, this is a huge, the trade of women basically, um, that is so normalized, is such a 12th house, is such a hidden enemy, because anybody that would honor their own self sensuality, give them like, whether it's housing first, independent of ability to work, listen to their stories, um, honoring and respecting and offering the ability to actually, you know, be safe and free regardless of if they are appeasing someone sexually or psychologically, because they basically begin to develop a mechanism of enjoying the control they would have over in certain cases. And the standard would be the price that is paid or what one is willing to do if they're even able to set that standard. And there's a lot of, I remember that even the security guards have addiction and sometimes would turn to sex work to appease their addiction to like hard drugs. And I'm not talking about even weed. Although I heard from a lady that was addicted to cocaine, that and she was like security at the red light district, that certain types of weed were stronger for her than cocaine. Either both because probably her body got used to cocaine, but I guess that was really high quality weed or something. Like I really don't know. Um, but that was like new to me as a person that's not into that type of stuff. Um, that sometimes we underestimate what something, the potential or the addictive potential of a plant, basically. Um, and that was the case with opium. It's just poppy seeds. It's poppy. It's the same poppy we would use for a moon talisman, but inspired by Sphere and Sundry here. It is the same because just like tobacco can be used as a talisman infused in oil, then poppy can be extracted at certain levels that are addictive, or they can be used as um, as a talisman, um, and um, and be used medicinally. So settings matter, dosage matters. Although when Terence McKenna talked about psychedelics, he said that usually people underdose, and that's why they suffer. That's why they suffer. Okay, but then he died from like a nervous system or neural brain, something to do with the brain. So we can't take away what the knowledge that he gained. We also can't take away that may or may not have had a price, or that was MK Ultra. Like I really don't know which of we have to take into account both when we look at, although a part of MK Ultra was the LSD experiments that also Feynman did on himself, and but Frank Olson may have been murdered or unalived following his discoveries on those experiments as well. Um, and Frank Olson was kind of like the Mengele doctor of. Now I really don't know if so has been Terence McKenna, because there is so much of these. And the United States had to do drug dealing to like keep a bank, and then and so is Holland probably, very likely so is Israel, so is Palestine, and we think about how that all stems from. Do we align our 12th house? Because basically that's the bedroom. What we don't honor there basically becomes the way people are treated upon invasion. For example, before 7th of October, although I have been one of the people that were kidnapped before, and they were trying to put me in Gaza, they were trying to put me in the Nova, and the thing is, I don't take drugs, I don't do psychedelics, I don't party, and I didn't live, in those settlements. I was tortured for a week, psychically tortured. It was no touch tortured, and that was um, and I was tortured before and after as well. Um, and basically, up until 7th of October, I did not know about the ritual satanic abuse that occurs, even though I've been a victim of it in 2019, 2000, like, and they were trying, and that was either they were either get a person to jail or to hospital. That's the MK often targeted individual project. Because I looked in academia into the body-mind question in the medicines as philosophy of science, a fraction of a millisecond before COVID. So I would just address things as, let's say, and I have to admit, I did do the first even 2 shots. Um, Normally, I wouldn't disclose the type of information, but I talk about it because of the scientific importance of that. And I saw it, that it's not good for me. As a aromatherapist, by then I already studied aromatherapy. I used the oils to kind of like purge that, um, and then my doctor tells me, well, how do you know it's from the shots? A doctor that family doctor that knows me for back then almost 15 years, and that would be kind of bizarre to me. But I knew that because I worked on the body mind question. I knew the gaslighting that happened around the antipsychotics and the class lawsuits and everything. Um, and particularly, um, okay, how a rebellion is being silenced, even so much to the point where a person doesn't have housing. They become depressed, and or anxious, and then they are given pills that would spark the more difficult ailments. And for as far as the patient is concerned, then they would get assisting for housing, or they would get funding for a degree. Um, and then it was like, okay, the thing that was missing um, suddenly became there through loss, and something is absolutely beyond unethical. Okay, like that thing should have been there. The fact that a person needed to go through the drug industry to get there, and the fact that it was so difficult to get open dialogue in housing first in Israel. We have open dialogue, but they're going to say, and I kept warning them that they're going to say it's not successful because we have forced drugging in Soteria houses, which is supposed to be balancing houses. So those type of trajectories and those things are silencing or dysregulating the sexual energy, which is life energy. And then when people don't have sexual sovereignty, those things are not going to help them. Okay. But what does um, is basically being aware of and targeting the budget, which is the classified project budget that is used to target those individuals. But before 7th October, I had no idea there's ritual abuse in Israel. I didn't know what is ritual abuse. And then when I saw the act of human sacrifice that happened in 7th of October, at first it happened in Israel before the response supposed, okay? People talk about genocide. Genocide, people think, what's genocide? It's killing people. No, that's not about the genocide. It's about the ritualistic human sacrifice that was done through torture. Genocide in itself, killing masses of people, is humane compared to that. Um, in fact, the first thing I thought about in 7th October is like, oh my God, I really need to see if there is an industry or a factory that does like assisted death drugs because we're going to need it on the masses. And it basically, at that time, it felt like the most needed things in the world is mass death, Saturn Neptune, um, that is not by sacrifice and torture. So also from the what they call Nochba, the people that came, some of them said when they killed people, they shot people actually, they said now they're in a better place. And I can see how they believed it because they were trained in those death camps funded by classified projects of countries, which including Palestine. A lot of the money was supposed to go to Palestinian people to build a country. But this is how countries be like um, when we have those, okay, those types of economic hitmanship businesses and the cults related to them. Um, in fact, the person in Netherlands that tends to ritual abuse um, with from within, okay, that was Trudy, but then from within, now there are attempts to have Van Meeren from Forum for Democratie, which also interviewed the Tates. So it's kind of like that's trafficking. Trafficking is continuing on the trajectory of extortion cults and ritual abuse. Um, but the only person that tends to that still has to answer to the fact that any prime minister would have to have the incriminatory tape, so to speak, of their colleagues sleeping with children structurally, and in any country, okay, or jurisdiction, okay. So people think they're just going to say Deming and they're going to get all the votes, and it's like, wait a second. Deming also was tortured in those death camps, and he can't sing like the True because the True can't sing because they brought Michel Nihul to silence the person. He's probably going through no-touch torture. Very likely Deming would be going through no-touch torture to not be able to talk about what he actually knows. Um, okay, and so I mean, if we have the number one true crime person saying that's a family man, and so we of what I called on bended knee for Deming, but it wasn't for Deming, it was something way bigger. Um, what's happening? It's kind of like it's kind. I'm sorry, but this is inspired by Heidelberg region. It's kind of like a and alles außer sexual sovereignty, and yes, I learned German, and the and alles außer Hochdeutsch was. They actually have a really cute accent. They don't say they say zu. So Heidelberg was where they were training people like Annika Lucas to be like child assassins, and that's where the red shoe type of thingy that happened with Madeleine happened. Um, they came from the north. It's kind of like I know that I'm supposed. I know that people are waiting for that, and I have to bring the right context. But in those societies, east, west, red, white, blue, green, orange, black, everybody Nazi. So now here's the thing: I'm an astrologer, and by us we use talismans to like I don't know enhance our beauty or enhance our health or make our podcast successful, and people go and infuse magic and astrology. And so the name Aleister Crowley and the Thelema is not like a stranger name, but people kind of, I guess they were comfortable ignoring the fact or just didn't want to get, death camped by their governments um, in USA. So now we go back to the 12th house and how the hidden enemy is those things that we don't even know that happen. And then when we see it, many people would think, even naively, oh my God, those people are animals. They're inhumane. They were corresponding to something that's happening within the country. Okay? And people try to make that play out on an individual level. It doesn't. Okay? The 12th house is before the first house. It's not the seventh and the first where we have like a mirroring effect. The 12th house is the water of preconception. Okay, the 12th house is where children are programmed, and that would sometimes affect their like sexual fantasies and so on and so forth. But it's not even their fantasies. Okay, people that I only time I was really exposed to like porn was when we filmed the movie, and it was supposed to be a scene in a sex shop, and then when I came back, I saw that it was like now I understand that they were literally doing like magic rituals for people to be addicted. But I was like, hey, I don't like something interfering in my sexuality, and I literally never watched porn because of that. But um, I had the sustenance by that age to be informed and aware that nobody told me, but I knew. It's kind of like even at age 14, I was writing about better sex for better world because I knew that my soul sought something that is different to the things that were offered. And by the way, I thought that Europe is kind of better because it doesn't have like the sexual taboos, but I didn't know the ritual abuse that's happening in Europe. Um, and I did see horrible things um, that I didn't know where they were coming from, and they were programming the people to have um, orgasm on these horrible things. I think Lada addressed once that she was um, even pleasing herself on um, things, horrible things that happen to women. She had a hard Venus Pluto aspect, which I also have, and how it was so important to build sensuality that is loving. Okay, so for me it was like, okay, what the actual essence, and sometimes it meant going into those fantasies and seeing what's underneath, what's underneath, what's underneath. But it wasn't until I was exposed to being loved in a non-erotic way that that truly balanced out. And then there were attempts to attack me, um, because I sought for the sensuality that's actually authentic, and not, okay, what the things that they do to try to traffic people. And they would involve the person people go to therapy for, because that's the person people would talk about the taboo things. Um, it's kind of like, if they can't have a lover boy to this person, let the psychologist be that person. Is where we have our defenses off, because every single thing we interpret as, oh, let's look at it, it's the boo thing, let's look at it, let's look at it, let's look at the fact that my psychologist was a freaking Epstein, and, and try to use the entire system, to go against me and to isolate me, to get me to even a hospital so that I would have my blood tested. And then he had personalities that fortunately disclosed what was happening, but it was difficult for me to even understand what these personalities were trying to say, because the topic of satanic abuse and ritual abuse so infused with trafficking cults, and the fact that this is how invasion happens, this is how the infiltration happens. While they were planning for 7th of October, okay, um, so this is something that we the people would be so dissociated from, usually until there is invasion. Or when a person is a faraway land, for example, people that visited Europe from the States and suddenly they began to menstruate normally. Okay, back when the food was actually fooding, because I know that there are a lot of changes happening now. But that was basically not being exposed. Even the people that bought at Whole Foods, okay, not being exposed to the many pathogens that are intentionally put in the soil, um, in the FDA approved food, even the whole food in United States. So you see how Neptune, faraway land, exposes things, okay, about the motherland, um, that people didn't know. And this is how people that talk about Epstein expose, for example, people like Ehud Barak, and our own, you know, government. In fact, the meme that ran in 7th of October was, people are this close, okay, you know, this pointing those finger, closing the thumb and the lead finger, okay, people are this close to find out that their governments are run by criminal organizations. So to those people that were hoping that the mafia will save them from the government, it's kind of like, what do you do when the mafia is the government, and the government is the mafia? Um, so, in fact, when are drug lords being taken down? When a regime is about to be taken down, okay, that happened in Soviet Russia. We began to see it in Italy, in the Netherlands. Um, okay, and yeah, there was a journalist that was assassinated around that time. Um, because he spoke against the WHO. Okay, so um, because that was the person that was supposed to be a Centaurian, and he wasn't Kissingering the World Health Organization. And you'd be surprised, one of the most scrutinized people in the Netherlands governance, I'm going to say no names, um, it basically was targeted as well because they were quite reluctant to put everybody in that much of a lockdown that quickly, um, and then they had to apologize for that. Okay, I disclose that now. So, um, and and that being said, people that grow up in death camps where to kill your best friend in torture is considered a good thing relative to the options that exist in the world because that person no longer suffers. Then, and you can imagine drugs are involved probably from a very young age, even by classified projects budget. Okay, so it's something that people don't usually. And then what people are being told is don't pay taxes. But then how will that? But people do need housing. People do need food, and so on and so forth. So it's not about don't pay taxes. It's about what do people do to make sure they're not funneled to classified projects. And it's not about not voting. It's about how do people make sure that they vote actually matters. And given that political assassinations are designed by those classified projects budget, um, so lots of things. But this going back to the astrology, it shows us how the 12th house in Hellenistic astrology would be considered this house of loss, grief, trauma, um, seclusion, things that one just kind of like this fated place where one just has to contend and accept things, but it's like that's the bedroom, folks. That's the bedroom. That's the bedroom. What we accept in the bedroom will be normal in society. It goes right from the lighter versions of, hey, why is my, I don't know, my male partner feel depressed and dysfunctional? Well, they're going through something at work. Okay, why is work turning off the sexual energy of my partner? What's happening at work? Oh, they're going through psychological abuse at work. Well, we must stand to that psychological abuse. But if to begin with, I don't want my partner to rape me, then that thing that they're going through that turns off their sexual energy, like I rather have a turned off partner than a rapey one. Same with women, okay? Because if why do there are certain women that were abused, and they develop enjoying the sexual power and control that they have over men, and they want to subdue them using the bedroom because they basically were raped in a very young age, and that's basically what they have like to contend with. Because they were taught that basically why is it happening they rape the women to make them sex pionages, and they and to make them supposedly able to have sex without love, and they rape them until the woman tries to appease basically one of the rapists, and then of course she would betray him and assassinate him any given time because he's still a rapist. And he did not, whatever, it doesn't matter what leadership or what mission or what goal, whatever he was building, he was not building a world where a woman is feeling safe and free in the bedroom and outside of the bedroom. So now let's reimagine the 12th house. Let's reimagine the 12th house when the bedroom affairs are are actually happy, thriving, joyous. That is a world where there's no hidden enemy. So what would be the 12th house then? I don't know, exploring faraway lands and making love there. Um, okay, recreationally entering tantric, for some people, ecstatic states. Oh, diplomatic relations would be very much easier. Um, People wouldn't go to jail as often, um, nor would they, nor would a hospital be something that's used against people's recovery. If I think about when the financial crisis of 2008 came in my life, where when I was beginning to holistically heal my ability to work, I began to be more and more authentic about and know what do I need from a workplace and not be afraid to ask. Okay, whether it's a path where I can, all the things that Gen Z are talking about. Then it was such a crisis where everything was set up to basically traffic me, and what they did with that was not being trafficked, but actually having funding for a degree and not taking things that would be addictive drugs that would be by prescription addictive drugs that people would later become addicted to drugs by, which was repetitively tried on when I actually wrote my thesis. And I was naive enough to think that people don't know that it's because the science is, I called it the salami method. We call it the salami method. It's not my invention, but I said the salami method of research because they cut one research into slices because they have to publish a research in a well established. It's kind of like a, you know, and saying this keeps this. I literally said it keeps science progressing at the speed of an Italian strike. I kid you not, I wrote that in verbatim in Hebrew in my satire during 2017-18, because I was like, okay, we have this problem of like sexual boundary violation. Fine. That was okay. Fun to mass assassin everyone. Because that would be what, like, what do you do for fun? Well, a mass deaths of all those who do that to people would be fun. I mean, um, and I think people noticed the attempt to hack to my nervous system as I spoke, right? Um, those that, like, we already have people that actually happen to. to a channeler that was giving a reading while she was speaking the truth, and to try to subdue her into um, cooperating with some trafficking agendas. Um, and so here is the thing, okay, because I said, okay, we have this problem of sexual boundary violation. Well, there's the intergenerational aspect. There is the fact that we have it's a university, so we have many departments. Why don't we have all of the departments coming to solve this issue? We have the sciences, we have the jurisdiction, we have psychology, we have, okay, transference. So what is happening there? Like, why won't we make up a solution that is actually keeping sexual sovereignty a part of the scientific discourse, and also it's connecting to plagiarism, which later, okay, they were taking creative force. They were trying to raise people to take the creative force, which I didn't know. I just saw the correlation of plagiarism correlating with um, sexual boundary violation, and um, and this is, and it was a complete human trafficking cult, full-blown Epstein, with all the Aleister Crowley dark occult, in a place where if I would talk about, let's see, astrology, the body mind, conscious, okay, I had to go into the how, probably I also discovered things that are relevant to how magic works, if people would get into that, because I had to contend with being targeted individual in university, not even having the wording to talk about that, or the phrasing to talk about that, and every single step in the way was trying to keep that from being tended to, and that is basically how a country is invaded, and also how an empire is invaded. Even all the people that were reliant on the extortion structure, they know that they are set to be betrayed, and they know that there is hardly anything they can do about that, um, unless that entire damn fuckery is untangled. Um, and we see that, okay, we see that in the world, and this is how, planning like a big world war, relying on one being the Kissinger, is kind of like, well, they might and they might not. If people don't change the way wealth consolidation is made, then it's just repetitive cycles of holocausts. Um, and I think we begin to see that in Netherlands, how satanic ritual abuse becomes a big topic of the elections, and in Israel it will be probably even bigger. Okay, abuse of children and so on and so forth. Um, because that's what brought those supposed cultures that behave that way to women and children and young men